Hello and welcome back to a history of Saps, Blackjacks, and Slungshots. As you know from my other videos, if you've seen them, this is my tour of probably the most forgotten weapons group of all time. So I kind of lump them all together. They are all related. This one here I call a frontier foldover. Frontier because of the shape, prevalent from the American frontier era. Foldover because of the construction. So if you remember, it's hand-sized, soft to the touch, and a good example of kind of an early configuration. You notice how simple this is. It's just a doubled over piece of material sewn around some stuffing. Now that material in this case is sand with, I believe, a little bit of metal at the very center of the head to give some extra impetus. But this is a soft sap because it's mostly sand. You can see the construction there. It's real simple, right? The seams, the folds. It's not much to it, but it was effective, believe it or not. Just sewing up a bag full of sand, essentially. Wouldn't have to have metal in it to be effective by any stretch. The sand club, or sand bag, either term is acceptable, that's been around as a weapon since like the late Middle Ages, and probably even earlier. So it got the job done, and it's a tradition that survived for a long, long time. It was really common in like the Victorian era and even early 20th century. And then there was like a Pittsburgh policeman who in like the 80s talked about how a sock filled with sand was still a common weapon in his area and how he knew it could kill. So there you see the seams. Here's the grip. Now what's odd about it, you're not going to hear this when I hit it, but that's how you strike, is sideways, right? And that's a little counterintuitive. If you're holding a knife, you would strike with the edge. If you're holding just about any other weapon in world history with that kind of basically two-dimensional, even if bulbous shape, you would strike with the edge, but not so with these. So there's a real unique motion. I don't think I've mentioned yet, I have a black belt in weaponry, and if I was going to design a kata or something for these, the motions I would devise would really look unlike anything else you'd use, to a certain extent. It wouldn't be like, just name your typical weapon, right? Sai, knife, nunchaku, whatever. And it's because of the unique construction and because of the strange shape of these things. So you can see the handle there, how it tapers and just gets thin and it's flexible. There's nothing in there. It's just the shape that kind of provides the handle. Here's the fold-over section. You see how smooth that is, right? Because, again, it just wraps around. Now, one of the things I like about this guy is if you didn't know the subject at all and saw this in an antique shop or whatever, weapon is maybe the last guess you would make as to what this is, right? Now, let's take a look up close. A lot of stains. I don't think any of that's blood because even if used viciously, this is designed almost specifically to not draw blood. Let's look at the stitching. Look how crazy that is. It's just amazing to me. It really is. There's 2 lines of stitching, so that's smart. You got a little redundancy there because you do not want this guy falling apart on you in a fight, whether you're a criminal or a cop using this, or just somebody who wanted a self-defense weapon. And as a refresher, this is going to appeal to cops and criminals because of its ability to put somebody down without, say, cracking the skull, breaking the skin, that kind of thing. This an item like this actually stymied doctors in the late 19th century when murder victims kept being found and they had no idea what was happening. They finally caught the guy, and he was using a sand club. That was his weapon, an eel skin sand club. This one here's not eel skin, but that's a configuration I read about more than once. There's kind of that sweeping, kind of swiping type motion you would use when striking with it. And that's how much damage these can do. Now, that was probably a heavier one, I would imagine, but that gives you an indication of how that unique load, the sand, can get the job done. It's pretty amazing. And in martial arts terms, we'd call that internal energy. Internal energy basically means that you damage the inside instead of the outside. And as I mentioned in my original video, this has been proven by science, and there's modern tools that replicate the soft saps capabilities. So it's pretty cool. And, the degree of effectiveness, the way you can ratchet it up is pretty surprising as well, because, again, you could get somebody to just go unconscious, take their money, leave, whatever, or go all the way to fatality without leaving a mark. Now, this sap isn't completely flat, obviously, or even mostly, but it's somewhat, right? And later on, you'll see flat saps and, similarly shaped ones where you can strike with the edge, even though that wasn't the intention. Not with this one. You'd want to strike with the broad surface only. That is the only application this was designed for, without a doubt. The metal that I talked about in the center of the head would, aid in that, right? Because you're using sand, which is soft, and this is a pretty small weapon, so that little extra oomph helps. So here's my D3, real classic leather teardrop shaped sap, and, that's filled with buckshot. It's a soft sap as well, but it's all metal, so that shifting metal is going to deliver more oomph than the sand here, hence the expedient of adding just a little bit of metal in the center. And that's a design that goes way, way back. And that is what I really like about this one, is that not only is it old, but its design kind of harkens back to really even ancient times, which is hard to do with a sap because we do not have surviving examples from back then. And especially in this kind of design here, this real simple one, it would just kind of disintegrate over time to a certain extent or just get tossed. You know, it's just not something that you're going to find very often. So I don't know this exact design, how far back it goes, but you will see it in vintage illustrations from the 19th century. And if you see one of those in the future, you will be one of the few who knows what the character being drawn is actually holding. I think the really ancient sandbags tended to be more like sausage shaped. They're kind of, purely tubular and would kind of bulb out at the end, so kind of like a baseball bat to a certain extent. But you can see how then this method of just kind of sewing one up came along and allows you to make a handier version. So here is the classic outline right there. That really gives you a perfect indication. That is the shape. And finally, remember that this is basically the world's original stun gun. That's what we're looking at here. Thank you very much. That's it for this one.